This is going to be a very brief explanation about removal and replacement of the AC compressor. This is on a 2005 Superduty 6 litre. I suspect that it applies from 03 to 07, but I only know for a fact that it's the same on 05 and 06. And there's all sorts of bullshit on the internet about what you have to do to remove this, and it's a bear to get it out. But you don't have to do half the shit that YouTube would suggest you do. The problem is that, and I'll show you in a minute, but this little guy sits down in the frame. It's a front frame member, and it tucks down into a hollow and bolts up to the side of the block. And the top bolt here and the bottom bolt here on the front are relatively easily accessible. They're 10mm, and you can get at them from the front. You can see them without really removing much from the engine. But this prick in here is an absolute bear, and the reason is that it tucks right down into that hollow in the frame, and I'll show you on the truck now. So if I was really into making great YouTube videos, I would have started from the beginning and worked step by step through this, but that'd just be a waste of everybody's time. There's the compressor, right? There's the pulley on the compressor, and it sits down inside. There's actually a recess in the frame. You can kind of see the frame member way back in, well, I guess the light isn't good enough to see it, but it's back in there. And the problem is that you don't have room to get to that third bolt that I showed you. It's way down underneath there, and you literally can't see it. I can feel it with the tips of my fingers. And so when I went to get it out, I tried working with the wrench down in here, but I couldn't get enough leverage on I could get it on, and I could hold it on the head, but I couldn't actually turn it. I ended up coming in from the front underneath here, put my left hand down here by the over here by the fender well and in the frame gap, and got the tips of my fingers so I could hold the wrench on the head, and stuck the wrench out the front over here, and I was able to remove it. And I did that all with just a standard combination wrench, nothing fancy. But I don't recommend doing that. So now we'll go back to the bench for a minute. So there's the 3 wrenches that I used. The one on the left right here, that's how I got them out. You can do it. I'm here to promise you can. I made a trip to town yesterday, and I used this project as an excuse to buy a set of metric, flex, ratcheting, and a set of SAE. Not that I need them on this project, but I've coveted a set of these wrenches for a long time and just never had a project that was big enough to justify them. And you need to remember, whenever you're working on a vehicle as a home wrench puller, any excuse to buy tools is a good excuse. So this project was an excuse to equip my shop with these flex head. And with these wrenches, it's still not dead simple, but I can get my left hand down in by that frame member, hold the wrench up onto the head of the bolt, and then work the ratchet. Now the only other trick was that all 3 of those bolts have to be installed in the compressor. So you got to stick the 13mm head in here and the 2 10mm heads in here, and they have to travel in with the compressor when you put it back in, because there simply isn't room. There isn't even room to put this guy in when you're all done. It's that tight in there. So you want all 3 of them in place, sitting in the compressor. So what I did was I stuck the bolt in the hole there, and then I put a little bit of RTV on the shaft, because it's open in behind here. Dab of RTV on the shaft of the bolt, just to hold it in exactly the right position. Let that set up, and then when I pushed the compressor in, I was able to, obviously the RTV didn't do anything at that point, and I was able to tighten them up with my flex head wrenches. Now one other tip, and this one was already on YouTube. make sure you mount these hoses before you put the compressor in. Pull the compressor out, pull the hoses out with it, take the hoses off. I flush them, and then mount them on the new compressor, because the hoses give you something to hang on to. Plus, if you had to try to put them in when the compressor's in place, that's a real prick of a spot to get at too. So use the hoses to manage the compressor. As far as the rest of the project, we'll just go back to the truck here for a minute. So you can see I pulled the shroud and the fan. In theory, I don't think you would absolutely need to do that, but the time you spend doing that will be time well spent. It's dead simple once all that nonsense is out of the way, and pulling the fan and the shroud is not that big a deal. If you haven't done it, the fan threads onto the end of the water pump right there. Diesel Tech Ron explains all this stuff. If you're not familiar with his videos, Google's your friend. Diesel Tech Ron, he'll tell you how you got to get the shroud out of here first, and then, well, actually it's kind of a shroud protector. There's a piece that slides in from the top. You take it out first, and then you have to, there's 4 bolts hold the actual shroud to the block. I can't even see where the studs are for them. There's one right there. There's just one over there, and there's 2 down at the bottom. And so that big plastic, this guy right here is bolted through these holes to the block, and that piece together with the fan have to come out as a unit. So again, the interweb is full of explanations on how to R&R a 6-liter fan. Bite the bullet and buy the right tool. This thing here, this goes in to hold the water pump steady, and this guy with all the funny bends in him goes on the nut that's on the fan, and you stick a breaker bar or ratchet or whatever in the end of it, and it comes apart. The only trick for that is, as I discovered the hard way, a 6-liter with a twin alternator setup turns left, the fan turns left, and with a single alternator setup, the fan turns right. And that is important when you're ordering the water pump, which I discovered the hard way. It's also important when you're breaking the nut loose with this guy, because actually on this 05 it was pretty easy to break, but on my 06 I had to question if I was turning the right way because it pulled that hard. So you need to be 100% sure that which thread you're dealing with. I'm a little bit dyslexic, so I had troubles, but you can figure it out by looking at the blades on the fan, and the fan clutch is going to thread onto the front of that water pump, and it needs to tighten in whichever direction the fan is turning. So if your fan is turning clockwise, you have to have a right hand thread, and if your fan is turning counterclockwise, you have to have a left hand thread. It's really quite simple, but I tell you, if it's tight, it'll make you wonder if you're turning the right way. The rest of the instructions are all on Diesel Tech Ron's website, and I can't add anything to that. I pulled the vacuum last night. It was sitting at 14, and it looks like it's changed exactly nothing overnight, so we have a seal.